Hi, this is Diana, Bright Knowledge Instance. Give you one thing that you can do today to move your creativity ahead. And today's instant springboards off the previous one. It was a question from Kate Willens, and she was asking, do structure and inspiration go together, or are they sort of the opposite of each other? And we started exploring how they really support each other. So let's amplify that a little bit more using a question this time from Barbara Carr. Her question is, what is the best way to transfer improvised music into notes to be able to replicate it? I have great problems with notation in the form of written music, Noten, as you call it in German. Thank you, Barbara. That is a great question. So you're talking about transferring your improvisation, which is an inspiration type of thing, into structure, into written notes. Here's what I would bear in mind, Barbara, is that music notation, how it developed, and this is a wonderful book, Capturing Music, the Story of Notation. How it developed was very natural. Music notation originally in the West was based on written texts. So a lot of hymns, for example, they would have these little squiggles on top of the written words. And based on the shape of that squiggle, you would sing a certain shape or a certain interval, sometimes even certain rhythms. So I don't know if you can see this here, but here are the words, and then the little squiggles on top are the notes, we could say. And that's why we read music from right to left, just the same way as we read words in the West. So using that in mind, you don't need to write a completely complex score like this with all exactly the right note values and the note names even, bars and all of that. What if instead you wrote a roadmap more like this? So let me describe what I did here. This top part is all written out just in words. So this is a roadmap for your improvisation based on words. And then I drew it here with these steps. And then I started getting crazy and I drew another shape altogether to show the shape of the song. I used to teach group music classes for small children between 3 and 5 years old. And I would have them listen to music and I would give them little crayons and paper and they would draw the shape of the music. And this eventually was setting them up to understand that this is actually the same thing. I know it looks much more complicated, but geographically, it follows all the same peaks and valleys of high and low, and the little black notes are quicker, and then the big wide notes are white. They're blank in the middle, and so they're saying spaciousness. I mean, really, there is quite a lot of intuitive material written right here on the page. But when we start here, it's confusing. So what if, Barbara, instead you have a written out word roadmap? So for example, I've said, set the intention of the improvisation. So, what is this about? So a title, basically. Start in Dorian mode. So I set us up in a certain key, and then I said sparse and high. So maybe I'm going to start up high. What image do I have in mind? Perhaps raindrops, a breeze, something like that. Because as you have an emotional association with your piece, you will remember it so much more than just, again, notes. So there's a lot of advantage to this method, I would say, this method of creating a roadmap. Then I say move to the middle and add force on the right hand. So I'm just making this up as an example. What image do I have now? So for me, force always have this grand sound, a little bit like a cathedral. So maybe I'm entering a cathedral now. Then move to the bass. What image do I have? Maybe I'm looking up at the ceiling and it's got this huge magnificence. Then the right hand goes high. So my hands are far apart. And then they come into the middle for resolution. So this was entirely written in words. So you can do this, Barbara. You could also do, this is exactly the same thing, in imagery. So I say Dorian here, start high, middle, low, and here we have low and high. This is where the right and left hands were far apart, and then I bring them together for the end. And then I kind of wrote an emotional trajectory of the song. We have our first little dip, and then we get really intense, and then we wrap it up. So try using that, Barbara, and see if that helps you. And for everyone else who's watching, think about how writing things down really, really helps. And it doesn't have to be in this fully fledged format. This can be really useful, but this can be just as useful as well, this type of format. So as we write things down, we basically give structure, and that structure allows us to, in fact, get more ideas. I find when I write things down, it kind of frees me up, so I'm not keeping everything, in my brain, in my conscious memory. I can kind of know that it's taken care of on paper, and then I can add additional ideas. So I get more creative. I can also feel a little bit more committed to what I have created because it's actually on paper. I've actually set an intention with it. And I find that by writing things down, it basically keeps you on track more. So maybe you're not going to be writing down an improvisation, but writing down what you're working on, what progress you're making with it, what your intention is for your next practice. So this is the takeaway I'd like to give you for today. Write down what you're working on creatively, whether that be musically, as in writing down an improvisation, or whether that be to do with your practice. Either way, the act of writing has this magical power of making things real, of transforming things from simply a dream, from simply improvisation, inspiration, into structure, into reality. So try that today and let me know how it goes, and keep sending your wonderful questions. Bye.